Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, President Park Geun-hye pushes for deeper economic and social ties with Uzbekistan as she starts her week-long trip to Central Asia. With Islamist insurgents in Iraq taking more territory by the day, the United States says it could launch airstrikes and act jointly but non-militarily with its arch-enemy Iran to support the Iraqi government. Plus, Thomas Müller scores the first hat-trick of the 2014 World Cup as Germany put 4 goals past a poor Portugal side. The US kick off their campaign in an hour against Ghana. Daybreak begins now. Hello, and thanks for joining us, to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, June 17th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom, and you are tuned in to Daybreak. Let's start with President Park's trip to Central Asia. On the first day of her state visit to Uzbekistan, the president met with Koreans and descendants of former Korean immigrants to Russia to promote her initiative of spurring economic relations across Eurasia. She also sought to win support for her North Korea policies. Choi You-sun filed this report from Tashkent.
President Park Geun-hye has vowed to expand economic cooperation and boost ties with Central Asia. Meeting Koreans and the descendants of Korean immigrants in the Russian Far East in Tashkent on Monday, President Park promoted her initiative to link energy and infrastructure in Eurasia. Talking about connecting Uzbekistan's rich resources with Korea's advanced technologies, President Park said more jobs would be created in both countries. The Korean leader then promised policies to help hundreds of thousands of ethnic Koreans in Central Asia to more easily visit and find employment in Korea. She also said teaching Korean language, history, and culture to Korean Uzbeks was a national priority for her government. Asking for support for her proposed humanitarian and civilian-based exchanges with North Korea to better prepare for reunification, the South Korean president said she will, meanwhile, respond firmly to Pyongyang's provocative behavior.
저는 포기하지 않고 북한이 진정한 변화의 길로 나아갈 수 있도록 노력할 것입니다.
As for the recent ferry disaster in Korea, President Park said she will make good out of evil to revamp the national safety system.
비정상적인 관행과 문제들을 추상같이 바로잡고 경제 활성화에 불길을 살려서 세계 속에 자랑스러운 대한민국을 반드시 만들어 가겠습니다.
With the Eurasia initiative high on her agenda, President Park is expected to seek to expand joint economic projects with Tashkent when she meets with Uzbek President Islam Karimov on Tuesday. Choi You-sun, Arirang News, Tashkent.
South Korea's chief nuclear envoy is in Moscow for talks with his Russian counterpart on the conditions for restarting the long-stalled six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization. Before leaving Seoul late Monday, Hwang Jung-guk said Russia's stance is similar to China's in that it supports the swift resumption of the nuclear talks. The two envoys are set to meet on Wednesday. The multilateral dialogue aimed at ending North Korea's nuclear program, involving the two Koreas, the US, China, Russia and Japan, has been at a standstill now for more than 5 years. Hwang's first trip to Russia since taking office in April follows talks with his US and Chinese counterparts earlier this month. Now, there has been a steady decline in the number of nuclear warheads over the past 5 years, but data suggests world powers are determined to hang on to their sizable stockpiles for the foreseeable future. This according to an annual report released on Monday by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. As of early 2014, 9 countries still had a total of 16,300 warheads, down by about 5.5% from the previous year, but the pace of reduction has slowed compared to a decade ago. The report shows the US and Russia possess about 93% of the world's nuclear weapons. It identifies 7 others as nuclear states, namely Britain, France, China, Pakistan, India, Israel and North Korea. Pyongyang, according to this report, has 6 to 8 nuclear warheads in its arsenal. A civic group that fights on behalf of the victims of Japan's wartime system of sex slavery has delivered a petition to the United Nations to call for the prompt settlement of the highly emotive issue. The petition, organised by the Korean Council for Women drafted for sexual slavery by Japan, was signed by 1.5 million people from around the world. The civic group is expected to call for a resolution to the issue at the 26th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on this Tuesday. The group also plans to give a presentation highlighting the brutality of Japan's military during and before World War II. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced into sexual slavery during Japan's colonial rule of Korea in the early 20th century. Now back here in Korea, and the country's rival political parties are wrangling over whether to go ahead with the Prime Minister-designate Moon Chang-guk's confirmation hearings amid increasingly heated debate over his controversial views and comments on a number of historical things. Ji Myung-gil has this report.
A motion calling for parliamentary confirmation of the new Prime Minister nominee, Moon Chang-guk, will be submitted to the National Assembly on Tuesday. Once the request is filed, legislators have 20 days to vote on the appointment. The ruling Saenuri Party has jumped to Moon's defense, saying he needs to be given a chance to be vetted through a confirmation hearing. Party spokesperson Park Geun-hye accused the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, or NPAD, of not giving Moon a chance.
The main opposition bloc is not even giving the nominee a chance to be questioned on stage. Not holding a confirmation hearing is anti-democratic and goes against the people's will.
The ruling party has attacked the opposition bloc, accusing it of using the controversy surrounding Moon to score political points. However, the NPAD, which has been concentrating fire on Moon's questionable comments regarding historical issues, continues to demand his withdrawal.
If Moon stays on, it will be an insult to the people, turn Korea into a pathetic nation, cast doubt on President Park's concept of a nation, and bring ridicule to the Saenuri Party.
In a lecture delivered at his church a few years ago, Moon said Japan's colonization of Korea and the division of the Korean peninsula was all part of God's will. The National Assembly will hold a 3-day interpellation session starting Wednesday, signaling the start of June's extraordinary session. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The elder brother of the de facto owner of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry and an avid follower of Yoo Byung-un's cult were detained on Monday as prosecutors say they were likely to flee. Prosecutors say the brother, Yoo Byung-il, is suspected of embezzling consulting fees from the ferry operator Chonghaejin Marine Company. Devotee Shin Myung-hee is suspected of helping Yoo Byung-un evade the authorities. Earlier Monday, the trials for 8 close confidants to Yoo got underway at a court in the western port city of Incheon. They stand accused of embezzlement, breach of duty and other charges related to the sinking. Most of the defendants deny the charges laid out against them.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
The Park Geun-hye administration here in Korea has made deregulation one of the cornerstones of its plan to revive the domestic economy. It stands to reason then that the president's pick to be her next finance minister should be on the same page as her. Our Kim Ji-yeon explains.
Finance Minister nominee Choi You-sun says one of his top priorities, if confirmed, will be to ease financial regulations. It's a pledge that falls right into the Park Geun-hye administration's drive toward deregulation in the financial sector and housing market. Choi compared the current situation in the housing market to the middle of winter, when people lack vitality and their activities dwindled to a minimum. The nominee says current regulations are not helping. Choi said they don't address the primary problems and that they were imposed years back when the market was flourishing. If approved by the National Assembly, Choi is expected to make a push to break down some of the barriers for home buyers, including those that put a limit on the amount of loans people can borrow from lenders, depending on their financial conditions.
In order to ease the burden for home buyers, I will ease loan-to-value and debt-to-income rules that are currently putting the brakes on the housing market.
Choi You-sun says the government's main focus should be on reviving the Korean economy and promoting the happiness of the people. He has so far refrained from commenting on the strengthening local currency, calling it a sensitive issue that must be dealt with more scrutiny. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Now, if you have a smartphone or tablet PC, then chances are you depend on its camera to capture those special moments in your life. And more of the world's smartphones are actually depending on Korean-made camera modules to provide that opportunity. Market analyst research in China says that the market share for Korean tech firms in complementary metal oxide semiconductor, or CMOS, camera modules reached a combined 50%, 50 last year, for the first time ever. Since 2011, Korea's LG Innotek has led the global market with a nearly 17% market share. Samsung Electromechanics and Taiwan's Light-On technology round out the top three. Global sales of CMOS camera modules rose from $11.5 billion in 2012 to $13.7 billion last year. Now, more exciting tech news, because Korea and the European Union say they will work together on developing next-generation 5G wireless network technologies. According to Korea's Science Ministry, the two sides agreed on Monday to start conducting joint research in 2016 to establish an agreed radio spectrum policy, as well as technical standards for better global penetration. Now, this is one of the EU's efforts to get back into the game of mobile communications industry. After lagging in mobile technology since its heyday in the 1990s with the GSM standard, the EU in 2010 announced its plan to roll out 5G networks by the year 2020. Korea, being one of the most wide countries in the entire world, announced earlier this year to pour more than $1.5 billion over the next 7 years towards realizing a 5G network. Now, Korea has one of the lowest fertility rates among the world's advanced economies, unfortunately. The data out of the US serves as a good reminder of just how difficult and expensive it is to raise kids here in Korea. Our Connie Kim has this report.
Low employment rates, smaller incomes, and difficulties finding places to live. It's a recipe that has resulted in Korea having one of the lowest fertility rates in the OECD. Data recently released by the World Factbook produced by the Central Intelligence Agency estimates Korea's total fertility rate at 1.25, which represents the number of children a mother is expected to have over her lifetime. Topping the list were the African countries of Niger, Mali, and Burundi. Israel, Mexico, and France had the highest rates among the OECD. Now, experts say the low birth rate in Korea comes from a combination of factors.
The low fertility rate can be seen among married couples and those who are not married. Among the unmarried, high youth unemployment rates and low incomes are the major reasons for putting off marriage. Among married couples, the financial hardships associated with raising kids act as a deterrent from getting pregnant.
Last year, 67% of the $14.1 billion spent by the Korean government on raising the nation's fertility rate was funneled into support for childcare. Yang says there is more that can be done.
In 2009, France poured in about 4% of its yearly budget to tackling the low birth rate, while Korea spent only about 1%.
Experts say the low birth rate will ultimately lead to a decrease in the working population, resulting in a slowdown in production and a reduction in consumption, which could bring down Korea's economic growth rate down to about 1.7% in the next 20 years. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we continue on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage with a couple of matches that took place earlier today, this including the highly anticipated matchup between Germany and Portugal in Group G. And now, while many expected a closer match between the two powerhouses, it was all Germany as Thomas Müller got Germany on board early with a penalty in the 12th minute before Mats Hummels made it 2-0 in the 32nd minute. But just before the end of the first half, Thomas Müller scores again, giving Germany the 3-0 lead in the first half. Now, Müller would then go on to score the first hat-trick of the tournament as Germany crushes Portugal 4-0. Meanwhile, later on the day, Iran taking on Nigeria, both teams go scoreless as the first draw of the tournament happened with a 0-0 draw. Now on Tuesday, 7 p.m. local time or Wednesday, 7 a.m. Korea time, South Korea goes on to face off against Russia for their first Group H match. So how does Russian side look going into the first match, and what are some things manager Hong Myung-go needs to consider? So taking a look here, Russia now has a great team chemistry, especially since all of their team members play in the domestic league. And as I've mentioned before, they have great defense. Now, of course, Korea has a hard time scoring at the moment, and this is going to be a problem. Also, when it comes to the offense, Russia tends to score early, so for Korea, it's important that they focus early on. Now, of course, the weaknesses this time, they have a hard time defending on the headers, which means they need to capitalize on the corners and set pieces. And they struggle with short-range shooting as well. Now, also, while attacking from the wings is crucial for every team, they struggle with that, so it's important that Korea counters on these attacks from the side. Now, one of the biggest concerns with the 2014 Brazil World Cup is obviously the summer heat and the kind of humidity players have to face. And while it wasn't as bad in most parts of Brazil, not the case in Manaus, where the Arena da Amazonia is. Now, as seen by the Italy-England match, many players were sluggish and had a hard time playing in the steamy conditions of Arena da Amazonia, where the temperature was at 30 degrees Celsius and humidity at 61%. Now, despite the heat, FIFA officials decided not to give official breaks that would give players a chance to rest and rehydrate, since according to the rules, it must be above 32 degrees Celsius for cooling breaks to be considered. Meanwhile, 3 more matches are set to take place in Manaus. And now finishing things off with some fun news here that's been storming the internet. Now, everyone would agree that Robin van Persie's flying header against Spain in their 5-1 victory was amazing, but now it's become an internet sensation. Now, we've heard of T-bowing and planking, which was pretty big in the internet, but now Van Persieing is the new it thing on the internet, as people around the world have been posting pictures of themselves lying face down on the ground and putting their head up, just like Van Persie's goal. And while Van Persieing will eventually die out just like T-bowing and Bradying, one thing's for sure, it was a goal to remember. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Now, the 2014 World Cup is a seriously exciting time, of course, for football fans around the world. The time difference, though, between Korea and Japan means the games aren't really on at the most sociable hours, to say the least. But that isn't stopping Seoul's expat community from getting behind their national side. Our Connie Lee met up with some seriously happy German fans.
Cheers, high fives, and applause burst out from soccer fans who aren't shy about showing their passion.
I painted my nails in German colors and kind of dressed red, black and white.
Show your earrings.
Oh yeah, and here.
The 2014 World Cup is in full swing, and here in Korea, you not only see Team Korea fans making a statement, you see fans from all over the world, especially those from Germany, packing pubs and bars to watch the games.
In Korea, there are living more than 5,000 Germans. And here in Seoul, we have around about 500. And we came together to celebrate and to watch together the matches of the German team.
Even though most of the World Cup matches are in the wee hours here in Korea, it's the love of the game that is bringing together the different people who are all rooting for their home country.
I just met some Swedish guy. I know some Japanese girl who came. I can see the Korean people, the German guys, of course.
A handful of venues are open into the early morning hours in downtown Seoul to accommodate those who want to watch the matches live and on the big screen.
We had a lot of interest in the World Cup. A lot of people were emailing us and sending us messages on the Facebook page.
And it seems like if you're a true fan of soccer, it doesn't matter where you are or what time the games are on, you watch and support, even if that means going into work the next day with some bags under your eyes.
Yes, it's a bad time for going to work tomorrow, but if you really want to support your team, your national team, then it doesn't matter how late it is, you just need to support them.
Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we are following this Tuesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Very good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. Sunni militants in Iraq seized another city, this time the northern city of Tal Afar, according to officials and residents there. The city of 200,000, located between the provincial capital of Mosul and Syria, was taken just before dawn on Monday, according to Mayor Abdullah Abdul. Unlike other cities that fell to ISIL militants, Tal Afar has a big Shia community. Meanwhile, in a rare stance, the United States and Iran are showing a willingness to potentially work together to control the Sunni insurgency in Iraq. The Pentagon, however, cautioned there was no plan to coordinate military activity. The U.S. is also mulling over launching airstrikes as the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier and 2 more warships are on their way to the Gulf. Russia has halted gas supplies to Ukraine in a major escalation of tensions between the two countries. The massive energy shutdown comes as Moscow's Gazprom and the Ukrainian government failed to reach a new gas deal ahead of Monday's deadline. Gazprom said it also filed a lawsuit to recover Ukraine's total outstanding gas debt of $4.5 billion. The gas giant, however, stressed that it would continue to supply European nations at full volume. Meanwhile, Kiev is refusing to pay its debts in protest of an 80% price hike. Ukraine's Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk said the gas dispute with Russia was part of what he called a plan to destroy Ukraine. At least 50 people are dead in Kenya following a strike by Somali-linked Islamists in the coastal town of Peketoni. It happened Sunday night local time. Some were reported killed execution-style in front of their families, while others were slaughtered during a World Cup screening. The Al-Shabaab group explained their assault as retaliation to Kenya's assassination of Muslim scholars and its sending of forces into Somalia. They warned Kenya was now officially a war zone and that tourists should visit the country at their own peril. Interior Minister Joseph Ole Lenku promised justice for the perpetrators before traveling to the area. And finally, high-ranking officials from Washington and Tehran will meet face-to-face in Vienna this week to begin a new round of negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. The current 6-month agreement between Iran and permanent members of the UN Security Council is due to expire on July 20th. U.S. State Department officials expressed optimism that a deal could be struck by the deadline, but admitted that significant gaps remain between the two states on the acceptable limitations on Iran's nuclear program.
Well, Jeju is being affected by monsoonal front, and rain clouds are dropping showers to area up to 80 millimeters are expected for the mountainous regions in Jeju and 20 millimeters for the rest of Jeju throughout the day. While southern provinces will have cloudy day and Seoul metropolitan area will have glimpse of sunshine with a chance of sporadic showers later in the afternoon along with thunder and lightning. And temperatures will be hovering low to mid 20s across the region, so expect to have a cooler daytime highs today. And if you're in Jeju, again, don't forget to gear up with rainproof accessories. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will rise to 28, while Busan tops out at 23 later in the afternoon. Now for other regions, down on Jeju and Dokdo should see a high of 21, and Mount Keungang tops out at 17. That's all for now, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Jion. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in half an hour's time, and we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.